This Choircast podcast is brought to you by Inking Christ, a theological approach to tattoos by Dr. Justin Scoggins. This book is an invitation to view tattoos not as marks of rebellion or mere decoration, but as sacred symbols that narrate the story of one's faith and life journey. Dr. Scoggins' aim is to inspire believers to embrace the artistry of tattoos as a legitimate and meaningful form of worship, reflecting the beauty and love of Christ in a unique and personal manner. Pick it up today on Amazon.
Welcome to the Unbelief Podcast, your journey, actually our journey together beyond inherited beliefs to a spirituality that works for you. I'm your host, Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. We can fix that later, right? No? Welcome to the Unbelief Podcast. We've got a Smarty Pants episode where we get to interview scholars and authors. But since today, February 11th, is the release day for my book, How to Not Suck as a Christian, I have gotten a friend of mine, Cameron, to interview me because it would be very strange to interview myself. And so that I could tell you a little bit about the book. And so Cameron, thank you so much for doing this for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's hop right in. What inspired you to write How Not to Suck as a Christian?
Okay. So I have this TikTok channel where it's called Skeptic Pastor, and it started to like blow up and have like 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 followers. And like a lot of the content that I was producing there really was like calling out the things that the Christianity that I grew up with, sort of conservative evangelical Christianity, does and did that harms people. And I was hearing, back from people saying like, hey, we are, this is really helpful. And, have you ever thought of writing a book about this? And so what I did was I said, okay, I'm going to write this book. I put a video on TikTok that I'm writing this book. What should the chapters be? And I got like 100, maybe even a little bit more chapter ideas. And so I went through those and selected let's see how many they are in this book, the 17 chapters of this book. So, that's how it came to be.
So you challenge traditional apologetics and argue that Christians should stop defending their faith.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So it's interesting to me, the whole enterprise of apologetics is kind of frustrating because apologetics, and for those people who didn't grow up being traumatized by evangelicalism, this is this sort of field of study, this way of being in the world that is trying to answer questions about Christianity or like common criticisms about Christianity or the Bible, but it's this like sort of argumentative format. So, and you'll see on all kinds of different social media platforms, people that are doing this. There's this just frustrating guy that people send me his videos all the time. He's like pleated khaki pants, tucked in polo shirt, older guy that stands on a college campus surrounded by college students that are like asking, saying like, why would you say gay people are going to hell? Or like, how can you deal with a God who commits genocide or whatever it is? And he sort of argues back with them and uses these arguments that have been created and honed over a lot of time that are supposed to quote unquote defend the faith. And that's really my problem with apologetics, is that it goes into the conversation assuming the argument. Right, assuming that because when you go into a conversation thinking it's going to be an argument, then the outcome is that like somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. Or with the idea that like, oh, I'm going to like argue with you and eventually I'm going to convince you that you're wrong and you're going to believe what I believe. But when we're talking about religion, like that doesn't happen in a like random conversation out on the quad at the college.
Right.
Yeah. And so like, and what it does though, having this whole thing, like this idea that we should train people in apologetics, that we should be arguing and quote unquote defending the faith, it sort of short circuits the learning and the possibility and the potential of those interactions, because if instead of going in with an argument, we're going in with like a learning posture, we open ourselves up, right? Because the thing that if there's any belief that I can say I'm really close to 100% on, it is that I am almost 100% sure I'm completely wrong about at least half of what I believe. I don't know which half, right? Otherwise I wouldn't believe it. But if I go into these conversations to learn, like it opens me up to the idea that like I could get better. Like I could discover that I'm wrong, or that like I'm kind of wrong, or, and I think this may be even more important, that some of the ways that I believe actually might be hurting people. And when I enter into a conversation with that posture, I can end up leaving not as a winner or a loser. I can end up leaving as a better person, or a more knowledgeable person, or more empathetic person. And that's really where I think the power is. And not only that, like people who do that are just dicks. And like, I don't want people to think about religion as something that like only assholes do, right?
Right. So what's the most dangerous way you see Christianity being misused today?
I mean, today, like this hour after reading the news, like it's just like a constant. I think that right now, and this isn't content in the book, but I would say that Christianity is being misused to reinforce unjust power structures, right? To give backing for people who are wanting to take rights away from people, away from trans people, people that are wanting to like take money away from like relief efforts like USAID, all of that. And like with the idea that that is fueled by what they call a Christian worldview. Mm-hmm. And as far as I'm concerned, that's like a complete misappropriation of the term, of the faith, of all of that stuff. Like, I don't know if you saw there's always this like worship service that people go to, the new president goes to, and there was an Episcopal priest that, I thought very eloquently, very fairly, and non-confrontationally, just said like to the president, like, hey, a lot of people who are hurting voted for you, and if they didn't vote for you, are your citizens, and would you please help them? Basically, she spoke, I believe, with a lot of empathy, and it was really interesting. The president, lashed out at her, and I think he used the word empathy in one of his posts on his weird social media network. And there is actually this thing happening right now where some people who call themselves Christian are talking about the sin of empathy.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And I'm just sitting here saying, like, how is this possible? Right? that is not a sin. Like a lot of stuff that they say are sins aren't, but like we just as humans can say like, no, being empathetic is actually really healthy psychologically, for justice, all of that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I feel like it's that appropriation of a faith that is concerned with love and peace and justice and acceptance and all of that to sort of shore up the structures of power around people who are doing the exact opposite.
Yeah. So you emphasize taking the Bible seriously, but not literally.
Mm-hmm.
How do you help people who are raised with more of a literalist approach?
Yeah. And this is huge. So I've got this community online called Not Church. It's a Discord group, and it comes out of like my TikTok work, and it's this like group of people who, many of them grew up in that exact kind of like super conservative Christian fundamentalists that were taught like to always read the Bible literally, and they have like had to let go of that, right? And so in this community, it's really beautiful because it's called Not Church because people do the things that people would do in church. They talk about spirituality. They're there for each other, but nobody's yelling at you and telling you you're going to hell because you believe the wrong thing. And so I'm with that group of people a lot. And so for people who grew up that way, some of them are still there, right? But a lot of them, it doesn't work long-term for them because life happens and you realize, oh, wait, if I read this passage in the Bible literally, then like I can't live my life like I need to live it. You know, like I can't be a loving person and read this literally. And so the holes come and it's problematic because they were taught that reading the Bible literally is the only way that you could, like if you didn't read it literally, it wasn't believing that it was true. Like how can you believe the Bible is true if you don't take it literally? Or the more common way of saying that is like, if you can't believe this one verse, then how can you believe the Bible?
Right.
But that's this like false dichotomy. It's like this logic fallacy that either you believe the Bible is literally true or you don't believe the Bible. And there's more options than that. Mm-hmm. Because as far as I can tell, like the Bible's real meanings are like not on the surface. Most of the deepest, truest meanings are below the surface, below that literal level, and require like a serious engagement with it and not just like a cursory reading of it. And the other thing is like, it's informed people's faith for millennia, right? And I think that's something that like when people, rightly so because of their own trauma, want to just let go of the Bible altogether. I get it. And, you know, some people, there's no way to re-engage with it. And I get that. But like, I always encourage people to like, just pause for a second and realize that, yeah, it's informed some of the worst parts of history, but it's also informed some of the best movements in history. And for millennia, people have found life in it, and it has helped them process reality, process what's going on in their world. And so maybe there's a way to engage with it that doesn't lead you into those negative trends, but instead helps you to find the kind of stuff that like the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. found in it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for me, what that means is like letting go of the need for like a literal, like treating it like an IKEA manual, and instead just treat it more like poetry, and just to go at it and say like, I'm going to look for something below the surface. And that's like the first step. And in the book, I actually kind of walk people through a system of like how to do that a little bit. And I feel like once we have that conversation in our community, on the Not Church thing, or on TikTok, people find a lot of help there. Also, if people want to be part of the Not Church community, they can go to patreon.com/skepticpastor. We charge $3 a month for it because we're not going to ask people to give us like a percentage of their income.
Right.
And so it's like you pay for what you get. If it works for you, great. If it stops working for you, just stop paying.
That's awesome. Many churches claim to be welcoming, but still uphold harmful theology.
Yeah.
What does true inclusion actually look like, and how can people spot the difference?
I'll tell you. One way they can spot the difference is if they ever hear love the sin and hate the sinner. That whole thing is just a justification for hate, right? It's not about love. The other thing that I tell people is if you go on a church's website and they don't say anything about racism or LGBTQ people, they're probably hiding the fact that they don't address racism or discrimination, and that they are like privately or maybe sometimes publicly not affirming of LGBTQ people. And then the third thing I can say is like, go up to a pastor and say like, hey, I've got these two queer friends and they want to get married. Could they get married here? And if the pastor says anything other than yes, right? You know that's not what they are about, because they're like, well, let's have coffee. You're like, no. Like, I need a church that when I say like, oh, these people want to get married here, they say yes. Like, they want to participate in that. And I think so those are like the warning signs that I try to, like, when people are like, I need to find a church or whatever. How do I know if this church next door is like that? I think those are like some huge, like really quick things. And then the other thing though, cause like I've been around churches that give lip service to acceptance. And while they don't believe that queer people are going to hell, and while they don't believe that like DEI programs should be dismantled, they actually aren't very accepting, because there's the like theological acceptance, but there's also the like openness kind of acceptance.
Yeah.
And you can feel it. Like, you walk in the door of a church, and nobody talks to you. Nobody looks at you. They're only talking to each other. And that's this other kind of acceptance that I think is just as important as like this theological acceptance. Because if you're going to risk spending time at a church and potentially allowing them to like traumatize you with their religion, at the very least, they need to be a church that's like bringing people into community and friendships and that kind of stuff, and not just people that are like giving lip service to progressive religious causes.
Yeah. So if someone is struggling with their faith because of past harm from the church, what advice would you give them?
Wow. Yeah. I think what I often do when people will come to me in DMs or on our Discord, and they have like particular religious harm, right? I think the first thing is therapy, right? So like, I'm a pastor. I don't know how to fix your brain, right?
Right.
I can't do that for you. And so like, for a lot of people, like dealing with their religious beliefs, that is not the first step. The first step is to go to a therapist, to work through the trauma, and a good therapist will help them at some point try to process their religion, their faith. The therapists like that are quality therapists actually won't help you think about specific beliefs, but they'll like help you figure out how to be open or not to that. And then at that point, it's finding a person like me, a pastor, or a community like a church or our not church Discord community, where they can explore, that will help them explore those beliefs. And to me, it's not just beliefs, it's beliefs and practices, right? Because for a lot of people, the beliefs are secondary to like the experience of the divine or the universe or whatever you want to call it. And so a lot of times it's really not the beliefs that you start with. It's like, where do you experience transcendence? For a lot of people, that's actually has nothing to do with the church or a Bible. It's like going out into nature and saying, okay, so if nature is it for you, then like what are some practices that you can do to be intentional about that? To not just go for a walk in nature, but like to intentionally go for a spiritual walk where you're paying attention to the universe, to God, and being present with that. And there's some really great practices that people can use to do that. Some people it's art, some people it's social justice, some people it is study, like they're nerdy and they want to get into an ancient text. And then for some people it's meditation, right? And really whatever it is, a lot of times it's easier for people to lead with practice than with belief.
Yeah. So Brian McLaren wrote the foreword for your book. How did that come about, and how does his work influence your work?
Oh, geez. Okay, so Brian, and I still feel weird calling him Brian, but I actually do know him now. But Brian's writing has changed my life multiple times. The very first book of his that I read was something called A New Kind of Christian. And it was this like, it was kind of fiction and kind of nonfiction. It's these like two people having a conversation. And so it's like beautifully creative in the way that it situates this conversation that really is somebody freeing themselves from a very static, very solid place of like of beliefs that like aren't changing, not open, that kind of stuff, into a more open place.
Yeah.
Which at the time was where I was, right? I was in that mode of like figuring out and realizing that like, I think a lot more is relative. The idea of absolute objective truth is really problematic for me in most places. And so, that book, oh my gosh. And then later he came out with a book called Generous Orthodoxy that is, again, it's like talking about faith in this broader, and belief in this sort of broader sense that, oh man, it's an amazing book. And then he wrote a book called, I'm having a hard time. It's called, Oh, Should I Stay a Christian? And it's divided into yes, no, maybe. And then then he wrote this much more recent book called Faith After Doubt, which, oh my God, I mean, like I have doubts. Oh, I faith all the time. And that book. So anyway, yeah, that's how he changed my life. And through his writing, he and I ended up meeting a church that I was at. He came and spoke. And as we were talking, there was a project that he was working on that I could help with. So he and I end up seeing each other about once a month on this Zoom call. And as my TikTok was like exploding, he was asking me some questions because his TikTok was tiny. And like, it always felt weird to me that I have this huge audience and there are people like legit scholars or people like Brian that, in my opinion, deserve way many more eyeballs on their content than mine does. And so I was like, hey, let's get on Zoom and I'll like walk you through the stuff that I've learned about TikTok content. So we did. And at the end of that Zoom call, I was like, hey, Brian, I've got this like book coming out and like, I'm sure you get requests like this all the time. So I'm really okay if you say no, but I had to ask, like, would you write a foreword to my book? And he's like, yeah, sure. And I don't know. I don't have a good poker face. I'm sure my mouth was hanging open. Right. And he asked me when I needed it. And I told him when the publisher needed it. And so I sent it to him like, I don't know, a couple weeks later, he sent it back. And so this is the guy, one of the handful of authors that changed my life many times. And so he's writing nice things about my writing. I got it. And as I was reading it, I was just weeping and weeping because, to hear somebody that's that influential in your life, like compliment you, I don't know. It was huge. And I was going through a hard time. So like, it was, yeah, that's the story.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
So how is your TikTok community doing now? I know things have been tricky with TikTok recently.
Yeah, it has been. It's going well. We had this, I feel like it was a publicity stunt for a new president, but when it went off for like 12 hours, I'm also leaning into YouTube and trying to work on that and be cultivating that community there. It's just a different world on YouTube. There's and so I'm going to be starting to create some native content for YouTube as well. But on TikTok, it's crazy, and I don't know. It's really wonderful because, like, obviously the Discord community is where there's like this deep community, but there's still so many people on TikTok that regularly comment on the videos who know each other from the comments.
That's
and
cool.
It's really cool. And I get DMs. Like, I had a guy DM me who had been fired from his church after he was outed. And we had a great conversation. And I don't know. It's just a lot of stuff like that for me, while the follower count it's something, right? It means something. I'm still not sure exactly what it means, but what really matters to me is the comments and the DMs, right? Mm-hmm. That's where the real good stuff, where the real work is done. And so that's where I spend a lot of time, just interacting with people. It's real weird.
Back to your book.
Okay.
What was the hardest chapter to write?
Let me look at the chapters. Let's see. I am going to say, Oh, I know which one it is. Let me just look at the, so it's in the book, it's like, there's this chapter where I wrote this chapter called "It's Time to Stop the Camp Altar Calls."
Yeah.
It wasn't hard because I didn't know what camp altar calls were. I knew when I included it was going to be hard for me to write, because what I'm saying in that chapter is these altar calls are manipulative and traumatizing. And what was hard is that I had done that a lot to like thousands of teenagers. And it's hard to write something and say something needs to change and to call out corruption that you were part of.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing. It hurts to write it. And like, as I was reading the chapter titles, I read that. I was like, oh God, like my stomach hurt a little bit, because like you can't not say it, but man, it's hard. It's hard to write that.
I get that. I was a camp counselor.
Yeah.
And Thursday nights, that was our cry night. That was the.
I remember I was in a camp cabin one night, and there was this like 7th grade boy getting ready next to a 9th grade boy, and they were friends. And it's just funny, also funny that like they're getting like dressed up like they're going out, but they're going to like the camp worship service. Mm-hmm. And the 7th grade boy said, "Is this the night when everybody cries?" And the 9th grade boy said, yeah. Oh gosh. Oof.
Yeah. So where can people get your book?
Everywhere. I would hope they would go to their local small bookstore, because they can order it. If not, they can go to bookshop.org, and bookshop.org is a place where you can select your local independent bookstore. And when you buy bookshop.org works like Amazon. It ships straight to you. But the local bookstore gets a significant percentage of the profit.
Right.
And but Amazon too, of course. And there's also an audiobook, which was a super fun thing to do. And so you can get that on Audible.
Cool. And is there any other, like, with the Discord or anything else, anything else things, coming from this book?
There's some funny merch. So there's t-shirts that say, "Take the Bible seriously, not literally." In fact, you can, there's a Bible cover that you can buy that says that. I'm trying to think, but there's a bunch of them. It's noomacommunity.com/store. That's NOOMA community.com/store. And also the descriptions of the products are like super snarky and just fun to read, even if people don't buy them.
That's cool.
Thank you so much for doing this interview. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And Cameron, do you want to plug something? Do you have an online presence, media empire that you want people to know about?
I work for Allendale United Methodist Church.
Okay, cool.
It's a progressive church in St. Petersburg. We try not to suck as Christians.
Yes. Right.
I'm also the communications director for Methodist Federation for Social Action.
Ooh, what is that?
It's an old organization that started out as kind of labor rights in the early 1900s, trying to
fair labor practices.
Yeah, fair labor practices.
Advocating for workers.
Getting rid of child labor.
Yeah, right.
Getting some more fair practices in general. And from that, it's become kind of a justice seeking. It's not directly affiliated with the Methodist Church officially, but sure. It's kind of just an advocacy organization.
Cool. So what's the websites for those places?
Yeah, mfsaweb.org.
Cool.
And for Allendale, the website is www.allendaleumc.org.
Yeah.
I say that one a lot more.
Yeah, allendaleumc.org. And you guys live stream your services. So
we do.
If people are looking for a worship service to live stream, which some people do, which is great.
Yep.
It's an inclusive church that's like you guys are having. We're recording this earlier, obviously. You're having a Super Bowl party, but you are writing letters to the Kansas City Chiefs to ask them to stop using First Nations. It's really great.
Yeah, we try and do something with every event that we do that's kind of justice focused.
Yeah.
And we're becoming more known for our drag worship Sundays.
Yes.
We do 4 times a year, where we invite drag queens or drag artists to come and lead us in worship.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. That's
cool.
my favorite weeks of the year.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
That's it. That's the podcast. Shout out to the Choir Network, to Patheos, to Matthew and Keith, who make everything happen. Now, get out of here. Go do something to make the world a better place. Okay? We'll see you next time.